I lead a team of scientists that are based in Atlanta, Georgia. Celtaxsys is a privately held company that is focusing on developing anti-inflammatory therapies for patients with rare diseases. We have a pretty unique business model in that we run a virtual model where we work with a lot of partners, so clinical research organizations, clinical manufacturing organizations that are contracted in to do work on our behalf, and the reason being that allows us to focus most of our resources on the scientific exploration of our research programs. I think it'd be safe to say, Peter, there's been great progress in the care for CF patients over the last couple decades. There have been new therapies introduced, different classes of drugs, but there's still a hole or a void in the armamentarium when it comes to anti-inflammatory therapies. And so while patient care has gotten better, the sad fact remains that you're going to expire between your 35th and your 40th birthday on average if you have cystic fibrosis. Some patients are lucky, some patients are really unlucky. I think anybody that touches this community knows that patients expire as adolescents, and that's just not a good standard of care. And even if the standard has improved to 35 to 40 years of age, there's more to be done. And the reason we're excited about Acebilustat and its anti-inflammatory properties, particularly for treating CF, is because there's no treatment currently approved or even routinely used to treat the inflammatory component of CF. And so by adding Acebilustat onto a patient's current treatment regimen, we can dial back the inflammation and as a consequence prolong lung life, ideally reduce exacerbations and prolong life. So based on the phase 2 results from our recently completed cystic fibrosis trial, we will begin preparations for designing and executing our phase 3 program, and that's clearly our highest priority. And I got to tell you, it's a good priority because if you think about cystic fibrosis, patients are still dying between their 35th and 40th birthday, and that's just not an acceptable standard of care. The standard of care has clearly risen over the last couple of years, but I don't think anybody would agree a life expectancy of between 35 and 40 years of age is really an acceptable standard, even with that progress. And the good news about the Acebilustat program is we're actually addressing a component of treatment for cystic fibrosis, which is currently a huge unmet medical need. That's in tuning down an overheated immune response with administration of a drug like Acebilustat. And while that standard of care has risen over the last couple of years, I certainly say it's a good thing to wake up in the morning and think we could do more for these patients. And that's what Celtaxsys is focused on, enhancing the standard of care for patients with CF, and we're delighted to be engaging with regulators to design that phase 3 program. The beauty about the Celtaxsys anti-inflammatory portfolio is that it has potential utility across a number of different diseases where the immune response has gotten so overactivated that the immune response becomes as almost important a problem as the disease itself. And cystic fibrosis is a perfect example of that. In cystic fibrosis, the reason patients are expiring early is because the inflammatory response or the immune response is just too aggressive and it begins to attack healthy cell structure. There are a number of other different diseases like bronchiectasis. There are different forms of dermatologic diseases, bullous pemphigoid diseases, where the immune response gets completely overheated and that immune response becomes a problem for the patients in addition to their underlying disease process. And so by using either Acebilustat or one of our backup compounds to intervene in these diseases, we can potentially reduce inflammation in a number of different diseases beyond just cystic fibrosis, but in other respiratory rare diseases and dermatologic diseases. And there are actually some gastrointestinal diseases where inflammatory therapy with a drug such as Acebilustat or one of our backup compounds could have substantial utility. And so while we're very pleased about the cystic fibrosis program results and are looking forward to engaging with regulators to design phase 3 and commence execution of phase 3 for cystic fibrosis, we're also doing exploratory work in things like non-cystic fibrosis bronchiectasis, which is a respiratory disease that looks like cystic fibrosis, just without the gene defect. And we're also doing some exploratory work in inflammatory dermatoses, rare inflammatory dermatoses, with our particular mechanistic approach to assess the utility of expanding our research portfolio beyond cystic fibrosis.